Welcome to 247 Real Talk. I'm your host, Julian Perry, and once again, it's a pleasure to be here with you for another week and for another episode. The episode this week is the choice of one of my most supportive listeners and viewers. I gave them the option of telling me what they wanted to hear me discuss, and they did. So, come right back, and we'll talk about it. So welcome back to 247 Real Talk Podcast. It's a pleasure to be here with you, like I said. Normally I record on Wednesday nights, as you know, but this week I'm a little late. I was somewhat exhausted this week. And so it's Thursday, March 30th at about 4 minutes after 9 as I look over at the clock there behind the camera. As I mentioned before in my introduction, this week's episode is a supporter choice. This particular viewer and staunch supporter of 247 Real Talk Podcast is someone who each week makes sure that they give me feedback and support, is open to discussions. And so when we spoke early in the week, I said to him, how about we make it a viewer's choice? And his selection for me to discuss tonight is New York City and our Mayor Adams' decision to convert a lot of office commercial space to homes and to tackle the homelessness situation in New York and to provide affordable housing. So in preparation for this, I kind of went on the internet and just Googled something like which state has the most homeless. And lo and behold, number one on the list was New York City, that had the highest number of homeless per 100,000 people. Now, this is a topic that I did speak about, I did touch on in previous episodes when I talked about work from home and the fact that the COVID pandemic has changed life as we know it forever. And working from home is a reality. It is a reality because one of the good things that come out of the pandemic was all of us being isolated at home. For many of us, it allowed us more time with our families. It sort of accentuated how much time we actually lose each day of our lives commuting. And you know, as you get older and as you look at the world through different lenses, you kind of begin to understand that the real meaning of yesterday is gone. So I'll use myself for an example. I'm up at about 4 a.m. each day. I get to work maybe at 6:45. If I leave work at 3, I'm home by 5:15. So we're talking about what? 5 hour commute, or maybe an hour preparation in the morning, so 4-point-something hours of commute. And that is obviously unacceptable, right? It is unacceptable that I spend so many hours. If you round it off at 5, that's 25 hours a week commuting. And it's unacceptable in not necessarily, or has been historically unacceptable. It's unacceptable in this new time, in this new world, right? I want to before I get into the whole commercial space thing, I'm sort of setting it up, and I want to talk about what my day was like when I was isolated with COVID. So I get up in the morning around I don't want to say 7 a.m. and I go straight down to my computer. I turn it on. I would check my emails. So I'm working. Sometimes I have early meetings, sometimes not. But at some point, I guess between 9 and 11, depending on when I had a lull, I would go put some coffee on, take a quick shower, come back to my desk, check some more emails, get up, go to the kitchen, pour a cup of coffee, come back. And basically, I would sit at that computer till, sometimes 6, 7 o'clock at night. Now, you would say, oh, obviously, you spent way more hours working at your computer than you would if you went to work. But you see, that was the beauty of it. The beauty of it was that I didn't have to commute, so that was not on my mind, and the whole physical stress of leaving work and walking to the train and taking the train and changing trains and all these things didn't exist. During the day, I was there to be home for when when the kids needed me, and so this sort of had a family component to it that was really productive and really eye-opening. Just the other day I was speaking with a friend, and we were talking about how many people we know who have retired, and it just turned out that they basically retired to go home and die. We spend so much time working, and we have to work to such an age. And many people have a retirement plan of 62, right? But in many cases at 62, when you should retire, because of economy, finances, inflation, everything else, people end up going on beyond. So you spend, 2/3 of your life working or more, and then you finish working, and that last part of your life, whether you're blessed with 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, should be a time when you enjoy the rest of your life. And many people don't live to do it. About 3 weeks ago, we're still in March, so maybe 4 weeks ago almost, someone who used to want to work for me, who should have retired a long time ago, didn't. She went out to lunch, I think they said she was at Target. She wasn't feeling well. Jumped in the bus to go back to work, collapsed on the bus, was taken to the hospital, and to make a long story short, she died. So she got up that morning, went to work, never made it back home. What was alarming was that she was 77 years old. She was, I believe she had 55 years of service. And it wasn't that, as my understanding is, it wasn't that she just wanted to continue working. It was that simply with the cost of living and the cost of housing and everything else, she couldn't afford it. So there's two parts to this, to me starting the episode like this. One of them is that the cost of living and the cost of housing is making it prohibitive for people to enjoy the latter parts of their lives because things are just so expensive. The second part is that we know that working from home has proven to be successful in terms of a family unit, and we know it's proven to be successful in terms of productivity. And so allowing people to do that means that a lot of office buildings in New York City post-COVID have remained empty. Many, many companies have opted for their employees to stay home. Before you try something, you don't know how it's going to work out, right? COVID forced businesses to adapt to an immediate work from home model. They didn't even get a chance to sort of phase it in. Boom, they had to go work from home. And I don't know what many businesses were expecting, but I can tell you for many of them, the outcome was beneficial to the business. And I think now they're probably looking at it as, well, we no longer, especially companies that don't own their real estate, right? They no longer have to pay all that overhead for rent. All the utilities or whatever comes with renting space for employees, when the employees can be at home paying their own rent. And that's a cost savings for the business. Now, some may look at it as a greater profit margin for the business. But actually, it could also mean the survivability of the business, right? Because maybe saving that money on real estate and rent and leasing is what allowed that business to come back after the pandemic, to have the resources to do so, and maybe not lay off so many people and actually keep people employed. So now you've got a situation where there are many businesses that are resident businesses of New York City, and their customer base has shrunk, and they're struggling to survive. And many are struggling to survive because, like I said, many people don't go into the boroughs anymore, right? Don't go into New York City anymore for work. They stay at home. But think about this for a second. There is another way, and this is what I like about Mayor Adams' plan to convert commercial space to housing. If you have people living, if you can convert those commercial spaces to housing and you have people living there, then those people will start supporting the businesses in those neighborhoods because that's where you live, right? It is sort of almost to a certain percentage, I think, a guarantee that if those buildings are populated by residents who were there, they dwell there, that the businesses around will do better than they're doing now because there's no one there at all. So part of the plan, I think I read online, was there's a lot of allowances and restrictions lifted on commercial space to allow for the conversion to housing. And that, I think, was the way to go. Even before we heard it now, I think in a podcast sometime last year, I think I mentioned that is one of the options that came to mind to me that should be done. And so when I look at the fact that we have the highest rate, a level of homelessness in New York City for the entire nation, we know that people need housing. But it's not that simple, is it? When you attempt to build low-income housing in certain neighborhoods, you get revolt from the residents of those neighborhoods. And I think it's a tricky situation, right? Because on one hand, you have people fighting the saying, we're creating housing for people who need houses, low income. They're human beings. They need a roof over their head. They need to have a home. They can't afford it, otherwise they're on the street. You also have to understand that people who live in neighborhoods that are low crime and have a certain level of cleanliness are objecting because we cannot turn our heads away from the fact that there are a lot of characteristics of that are tied with socioeconomic status. And people who are, low income, you have decent, clean people, but you also have people in there who have that status because of their lifestyle. And part of that lifestyle could also involve vagrancy, could involve violence, could involve criminal acts, could involve a lot of things. And so people who live in neighborhoods that are otherwise safe or relevantly safe become scared and object to what they think will happen to their neighborhoods. The fact of the matter is many of the homeless people in New York City are people who have a drug problem. And I think that providing housing in some of these commercial buildings is a great opportunity for them, but we can't just do that alone. So you can't convert these commercial buildings to housing, allow these people with lower incomes and you subsidize their income and you subsidize the apartment and you have them live there and then you say, okay, you have a roof over your head. It will take an aggressive plan to also provide hope for these people, provide jobs for these people, provide a way to an affordable education. Don't let me get started about student loans. So we need to find a different way because most people these days don't want to go to school because of the debt that they incur and with no guarantee of any kind of future. We need to make sure that there are support programs, drug programs, rehabilitation programs, mental health programs. And maybe when you create these nice homes or apartments from these empty or within these empty commercial spaces, you set certain prerequisites for the people who get the opportunity to live there. They have to check in with their mental health counselor frequently. They have to attend the drug programs if that was one of their problems, and they have to understand that part of their ability to move forward and move onward takes a certain amount of investment of them as well. Now, I know all of that sounds good, but it's still not enough. And I'll go one step further. A lot of who people are, many people are low-income people. So, when I say low-income people, I want to be careful of that term, because I want to tie it to the fact that I think the majority of low-income households are people of color. And we sort of want to lump them in a box and label them. But I think that's the biggest mistake, right? A lot of these people have had dreams for a long time, even generation after generation. And for a lot of these people, hope has been stolen. They have been oppressed by systemic racism, by the neighborhoods that they live in, by the organized effort to make sure that they remain in that status. Drugs have been introduced into their lives in their neighborhoods as the only way for them to own something or to buy something or to afford something. And what comes with that? What comes with the drugs? Violence and death. So, there's an old saying that says you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. And they're sort of stuck in this situation where they've been oppressed so long, especially generation after generation, that even if you snatch them out of that lifestyle and you put them in a nice new apartment, in a nice new office building somewhere in Brooklyn or Manhattan, that doesn't change anything. It's like what do they say? A leopard doesn't change its spots. I don't think that's necessarily true for human beings. But in order for the human leopard to change its spots, you have to have a lot more investment in those individuals. And when I say investment, I'm not just talking money, again, not just programs, but they have to be exposed to a life that you support for a sustainable period of time that makes them eventually morph, because human beings are creatures of conditioning. If you oppress someone and keep them in poverty, eventually poverty is all they know and poverty is all they expect. If you snatch that same person out of poverty and put them into a lifestyle of riches, and you condition them where they can exist in that lifestyle of riches and that lifestyle of expecting the best, and you leave them there long enough, they become conditioned by their environment. Many of you recall there was only a movie, but there was a movie with Eddie Murphy, I think, and Dan Aykroyd, Trading Places. And there was the experiment where they took Dan Aykroyd and took him out of his rich lifestyle and put him into the poor neighborhood, and took away everything he owned and did the flip with Eddie Murphy to see what would happen. Now, it was only a movie, but a lot of that movie had some truth to it. I'm not saying you have to make people rich. I'm saying that you have to give them opportunities that are sustained. When you show someone a different way of life, it can't just be a glimpse and then it disappears. We have a lot of programs, we have a lot of people who come up to the forefront and promise a whole lot of things to help people. They solicit donations, and we only find out later that they actually use the donations to take a cruise and to fill their pockets, and very little went to the people who needed it the most. You've got to provide people with sustainable hope. And when they put one foot in front of the other, they need to have tangible and visible progress. They need to recognize that. We are creatures of hope. We are creatures that when we see opportunity to lift ourselves, most of us, we can't speak for everyone, but most of us will grab onto that opportunity. And if that opportunity looks like it leads to another one and to betterment, we'll keep reaching. Okay? For instance, let's think about it this way. If I laid out a mile long of $20 bills, 15 feet apart, or far enough apart where you can't see the next one unless you walk towards it. If someone picks up a $20 bill and you tell them, look, if you walk the next 15 feet on your own, you're going to get another 20. And they walk, you encourage them enough to walk the other 15 feet and they get the second 20. And you say to them, listen, if you walk another 20 feet, you're going to get 100. And you keep going like that. that person will always make that step forward because now there's hope, there's belief, and they've seen the results of their efforts. But when you put people in a system that's supposed to support them, they go to offices to get support, people treat them badly, speak to them like they're dirt. They fight a system that they struggle to get basic things in their lives to feed their families. They hear about programs and they try to get into the programs, and it's more difficult than anything else they have to do. If you make the path to being uplifted so difficult, then you will not uplift the people. So it doesn't matter where they live or what you do, you won't be able to sustain the effort. I love this idea, like I said, of New York City Mayor Adams of converting commercial space to housing. And I'm hoping that when they do that, they look at the entire picture of everything that's needed. So the people, however they populate these places, they need to make sure that they keep a certain standard. And that will never happen by giving people these new opportunities or these new places to live and then walking away and say, hey, you got a new place to live. People who have been oppressed for a long time need a lot more. This is a great effort and a great initiative as a start. But you need to recognize, or we need to recognize also, that the people who already live in those neighborhoods also have a right to expect that the standard of their neighborhood remains the same or gets better but not worse. Right now, every time any official talks about building housing in any neighborhood, low-income housing, the trigger words are low income. That's because people have come to accept that with that term low income comes violence, comes lower property value sometimes because of what happens to the neighborhood. But we often want to blame the people who commit the acts. And yes, they can be blamed to an extent. But we need, as I said, we need to look deeper to the fact that the people who commit the acts commit them because all the other support systems around them have failed. And every single one of us are responsible for that. These people need help. Those of us who live affluent lives, need to learn to give back. Those of us who go through our struggles daily can still find ways to give back. There's always something we can do to help. And if we do this right, and these buildings, these commercial buildings, like I said, are converted correctly. And when I say convert correctly, let me pause there for a second too. They need to be maintained in the sense of paint and any fixes that need to be done. The elevators needs to work. The buildings need to be cleaned. There needs to be no rats and rodents around. There need to be things that make sure that people feel that they're living somewhere that's worthwhile. Then there need to be programs and different avenues of encouragement built into those spaces, geographically built in, whether it be the building down the block or whether it be a floor within the same building that's converted to a child care center, the one that's converted to a mental health center, that's converted to a library floor, a small version of it that's converted to a vocational something that you can learn a trade. We need to provide support systems so that we limit the amount of negativity that comes along with putting people who have struggled so hard and who have accepted oppression into neighborhoods where they see others living way better than they are, and find it so unfair that they resort to some level of some criminal act to try to even the playing field or to try to survive. We can't place them there and ignore them. Again, I love this opportunity because if we do it right, if we stand up for the people, if we understand, first of all, that we don't point our fingers and say, well, you did this or you did that, because we don't really know their story. But what we do know is the story of how people of color were oppressed, and the story of how they lacked opportunities were not made available for them. I've had, again, podcast episodes I've talked in detail about oppression, about the struggles, about how drugs were introduced to a lot of these neighborhoods, about how hope was controlled and guided into a certain lifestyle that was an illegal lifestyle, but presented a myth of what opportunity looks like. And none of it is sustainable, right? A lot of those people who took those opportunities and followed that path are either in jail, incarcerated, or they're dead. There's always hope when we have people like New York City Mayor who offer paths of hope. The people of New York City need to support this effort that he's trying to do. And we need to do this together for other human beings. At the end of this life, we're all the same. Opportunities provided, sustainable opportunities, hope that is always present in someone's face, choices that are available, that are reachable choices, that are attainable choices, not choices that seem so difficult and so far out of reach that people just decide to take the other option because they've been down this road before, they've failed down that road before, and it's been there because every single step they've had to climb, they've felt someone ignore them, someone label them, and the system has simply failed. I don't believe that because the world is getting older and because a lot of things in life are degrading, that we as humans have to degrade too. We need to stand up when we see good things and good initiatives being implemented and become part of the solution and not remain either a part of the problem or simply ignore the problem completely. So I hope that this works out. I'll keep an eye on it, and I encourage the mayor to move forward this initiative. I think he can be successful with it, and I think it will be a great thing for New York City. I encourage people who live in neighborhoods who might be affected by this to join together and have conversations with our elected officials to come up with something that will make sure that their property values don't go down, and that their neighborhoods remain clean and safe, and understand clearly and make a pact that everybody lives up to as to how they will get there and how they will implement it. At the same time, making sure that we nurture people who have struggled, people who are still looking for opportunity, and we help those who've been oppressed for so long to find a way forward and get one step closer to what we call the American dream. When I started this podcast tonight, I said it was Thursday, March 30th. Today was an epic day in the history of the United States. For the first time ever, we have a president who was indicted. I'm not going to comment on that at this time. For many reasons. Number one, because no one knows what the charges are. And number two, because I can't stand the violence that surrounds it, the nonsensical violence where people want to hurt each other and kill each other over someone who they support politically. But if that someone saw them today, they wouldn't know who they are. They don't know this person. They don't know much about them other than what they see in the public eye. It's the most idiotic thing that human beings do, to hurt each other over someone or something that at the end of the day cares about neither one of them. I thank you so much for being a part of the 247 Real Talk podcast again this week. I want to thank you and every single supporter, all the people who reach out to me and chat and send me encouragement and continue conversations and give me make recommendations of what they would like to hear. I thank you all so much. This podcast is about real talk. I am never claiming to have all the answers or to even be right. All I'm trying to do, for those of you who have recently joined, and I want to make a point of that, I've had a nice surge in subscribers on YouTube, and I'm so thankful for each and every one of you. I encourage you to subscribe. I encourage you to share the podcast and have others subscribe, because the bigger this conversation gets, the more power we have as people to determine the next step in our lives. Real talk is not about right and wrong in opinions. Real talk is just real talk. My opinion can be terribly flawed, and in a constructive, kind, and respectful way, we can have a conversation. So either you show me the error of my ways, or maybe I show you something, or maybe we simply agree on something enough to move it forward as a cause to make a difference. I am so honored to have this opportunity. I'm so honored to have you respond to me, making an effort to make a difference. And I thank you so much for your time. And do have a great week ahead, weekend and week, until we talk again next week. Take care of yourselves and do take care of each other.